You have been served. The stranger didn't even say hello. He just shoved a thick packet of legal documents into my chest and walked away. I tore open the envelope, my hands covered in sawdust. It wasn't a bill. It was a lawsuit filed by my own parents, Claudia and Arthur Vance versus Julian Vance. They weren't suing for money. They were filing for quiet title, claiming they were the true owners of the Victorian home I had spent 3 years restoring with my own sweat and savings. The document called me a squatter. It demanded my immediate eviction so my older brother, Justin, could take possession of the master suite I had just finished painting. They weren't asking. They were taking. I sat on the unfinished floor. The legal papers spread out around me like a debris field. The smell of fresh pine sawdust, usually my favorite scent, suddenly made me nauseous. I read the complaint again. Constructive trust. It was a fancy legal term for a simple lie. My parents, Claudia and Arthur, were claiming that the $150,000 I had poured into this renovation wasn't my money. They claimed it was their cash, entrusted to me, and that I was merely the project manager for their investment. They weren't just rewriting history. They were stealing 3 years of my life. 3 years ago, this house was a condemned shell. The roof was caving in. The pipes were stripped by copper thieves. And the basement was a swimming pool of black mold. My parents had inherited it from my grandmother, and saw it only as a burden. If you can fix this pile of junk with your own money, Arthur had told me, handing over the keys with a sneer, you can keep it. We wash our hands of it. He laughed when he said it. He thought I would fail within a month. I didn't fail. I worked double shifts. I ate beans and rice. I saved every dollar. I spent $150,000 of my own hard-earned money on materials. But the money was the easy part. The labor was the price I paid in blood. I learned to sweat copper pipes. I learned to hang drywall until my shoulders burned. I spent nights scraping layers of lead paint until my fingers were raw and bleeding. I breathed life back into this house, inch by painful inch. While I was inhaling drywall dust, my older brother Justin was finding himself. That journey was expensive. I knew the numbers because Claudia complained about them to me, expecting sympathy. They paid off his $45,000 credit card debt from his lifestyle influencer phase. They gave him $80,000 for a crypto investment that vanished overnight. They refinanced their own home to fund his luxury streetwear brand that sold exactly 0 shirts. In total, they had incinerated over $215,000 to keep Justin comfortable, while I had to beg them to co-sign a permit application. I remember the day I finally snapped. It was a year into the renovation. I was in the basement, covered in grime, hauling out bags of wet, rotted insulation. Justin had come over to supervise, which meant sitting on a clean bucket eating a sandwich and complaining that the dust was ruining his appetite. I marched upstairs to the kitchen where Claudia was looking over paint swatches I had paid for. I showed her my blistered hands. I begged her to make him help, or at least make him stop mocking me. Claudia didn't yell. She didn't get angry. She just looked at me with a terrifyingly calm, pitying smile. She took my hand, my rough, calloused, dirty hand, in her manicured ones. Look at this, Julian, she said softly. Look how strong these hands are. You have a peasant's strength. You were built to endure. You're like a draft horse, solid, reliable, made for the heavy yoke. She glanced toward the basement door where Justin was hiding. Your brother is different. He's an artist. He's delicate. The world hurts him in ways you can't understand. He needs a sanctuary. He needs us to carry him. You should be proud that you have the strength to serve him. That is your purpose, Julian. To pull the cart so he doesn't have to walk in the mud. I pulled my hand away that day, shivering not from the cold, but from the realization. She didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as livestock. A utility, something to be used until it broke, then discarded. I looked down at the lawsuit. The draft horse had finished the job. The barn was built, warm and safe and valuable. Now, the owners wanted to put the delicate stallion in the stall I had made, and send the workhorse to the glue factory. They thought the horse would just accept the bridle. But they forgot that animals bite when they are cornered. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for a lawyer I met at a zoning hearing. I wasn't going to pull their cart anymore. I was going to run them over. I was gone for 48 hours. Just a weekend job installing custom cabinets 2 towns over to pay for the lawyer's retainer. When I pulled my truck into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the oil stain. A fresh, black puddle on the pristine concrete I had poured myself last summer. My father's Honda CR-V was parked on the lawn, its tires tearing up the fescue grass I had spent months nurturing. I marched to the front door, keys in hand. I shoved my key into the deadbolt. It slid in, but it wouldn't turn. The metal felt wrong. I looked closer. The hardware was brand new. Cheap, shiny brass that clashed with the vintage aesthetic I had painstakingly restored. They hadn't just broken in. They had rekeyed my house. I didn't waste time banging on the door. I went around to the back patio. The pantry window had a loose sash weight I hadn't gotten around to fixing yet. I shimmied it open with a putty knife and dropped into the kitchen. The smell hit me instantly, a nauseating blend of stale pepperoni, cheap body spray, and weed. The smell of a teenage locker room. I followed the stench up the stairs to the master suite. The door was wide open. Justin was sitting at my antique mahogany vanity. Except it wasn't a vanity anymore. It was a command center. He had set up his 3-monitor gaming rig right on top of the wood finish, scratching the surface I had spent a week French polishing. My clothes, my work boots, my heavy jackets, my jeans were kicked into a heap in the corner like garbage. His dirty laundry was scattered across my bedsheets. "What are you doing?" My voice was low, shaking with a rage that felt hot and sharp in my throat. Justin spun his chair around. He was wearing his noise-canceling headphones around his neck. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. "Mom said I could take the big room," he said, popping a chip into his mouth. "The lighting is better for my stream. Besides, you're never here anyway." I grabbed the power cord to his rig and yanked it from the wall. The screens went black. "Get out!" Before he could scream, blue and red lights flashed through the window. I ran downstairs and threw open the front door. Claudia and Arthur were standing on the porch, flanked by 2 police officers. "That's her," Claudia said, pointing at me. She broke in through the back window. "We heard the crash." "I live here," I shouted, stepping out to meet the officers. "I own this house. These people changed my locks while I was at work." The older officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, calm down. We need to see ID and proof of residency." I reached for my wallet, but Claudia was already moving. She didn't yell. She didn't act crazy. She opened her designer purse with the calm, practiced motion of someone producing a coupon at a grocery store. She pulled out a crisp document protector. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding," she said, her voice dripping with maternal concern. "Our daughter is struggling right now. We've been living here for 6 months as her full-time caregivers. She has a history of instability." She handed the officer a document. I craned my neck to see it. It was a lease agreement. A caregiver contract. Dated 6 months ago. And at the bottom, in blue ink, was my signature. It was a perfect forgery. "That's fake," I said, my voice rising. "I never signed that. That's not my signature." The officer glanced at the paper, then at me, then at the house full of my family. He saw a civil dispute. He saw paperwork. He saw a hysterical young woman and 2 calm, well-dressed parents. He handed the paper back to Claudia. "Ma'am," the officer said to me, "if you want to contest the lease, you have to take it to civil court. We can't adjudicate a landlord-tenant dispute on a Sunday. We can't kick out residents with a valid lease. They don't live here. We have mail inside," Arthur added helpfully. "And our son is upstairs. It's a civil matter," the officer repeated, turning toward his cruiser. "Sort it out with a judge. Have a good night." They drove away. The silence left behind was heavy and suffocating. Claudia turned to me. The maternal mask vanished, replaced by a cold, victorious smirk. "You really should be more careful with your legal documents, Julian," she said. "Now, come inside. You can sleep on the pull-out sofa in the den. Justin needs his rest. He has a big tournament tomorrow." She walked past me into my house and locked the door. Mr. Vance's office didn't look like a place where justice happened. It looked like a dental clinic. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of stale coffee. Vance himself was a man of few words, and even fewer emotions. He laid the legal complaint on his desk and smoothed it out with a precision that made my skin crawl. "It's a constructive trust claim, Julian," he said, his voice flat. "Your parents aren't claiming they paid the contractor directly. They know that paper trail doesn't exist. They are claiming they funded the renovation with cash." "Cash?" I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "They haven't had cash since 2010. They financed their groceries. According to this affidavit." Vance tapped the paper. "Claudia and Arthur sold a collection of family heirlooms. Jewelry, silver, antique firearms over a period of 10 years. They claim they stockpiled the proceeds, roughly $150,000, in a home safe to avoid tax liabilities. They call it legacy capital. They claim they physically handed this cash to you, in installments to pay for materials, effectively making you a trustee of family funds, not the owner of the property." My stomach dropped. It was a brilliant lie. It explained everything. The lack of bank transfers, the lack of checks, the reason I had the receipts but they claimed the funding. It was a he said, she said scenario. But they had 3 witnesses, my parents and Justin, against just me. In civil court, that could be enough. "They are lying," I said, my voice trembling. "I earned that money. I have my pay stubs. I have my withdrawal slips. And they will argue you used your withdrawals for living expenses while using their cash for the house, Vance said, taking off his glasses. Julian, listen to me. Without a smoking gun, this goes to trial. Trials cost money. Judges are unpredictable. They are banking on you settling to avoid the risk. I slumped in the chair. I felt the weight of the draft horse harness settling back onto my shoulders. They had thought of everything. They had weaponized their own shadiness, the tax evasion, the hoarding to steal my future. I pulled the affidavit toward me, reading their lies in black and white. Plaintiff asserts cash transfer of $50,000 commenced on August 12, 2021. I stopped. The date burned into my retinas. August 12, 2021. My heart hammered against my ribs. I closed my eyes, digging through the filing cabinet of my memory. August 2021. The summer of the heat wave. The summer I started the roof repairs. But there was something else. I remembered the kitchen table covered in paperwork. I remembered Claudia crying about creditors calling the house. I remembered driving them to a federal building downtown because their car had been repossessed. I opened my eyes. A smile spread across my face, not a happy smile, but the cold, sharp grin of a predator spotting a limping prey. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice steady as steel. Do you have access to federal court records? Of course. Look up Claudia and Arthur Vance. August 2021. Specifically, look for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing. Vance typed on his keyboard. Click. 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 He stopped. He leaned in closer to the screen. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Well, he said softly, that changes things. They had gotten greedy. They had tried to weave a perfect lie, but they forgot the one truth they had told the government 3 years ago to save their own skins. They had handed me the murder weapon. Now, I just had to get them to pull the trigger. The settlement meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room that smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. My parents sat on one side of the mahogany table, flanked by their lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my work truck. Justin was there too, slouching in the corner, playing a game on his phone with the volume turned just low enough to be annoying. I wore my oldest flannel shirt and jeans with paint stains on the knees. I wanted to look small. I wanted to look defeated. We appreciate you coming to your senses, Julian, Arthur said, leaning back in his chair. He looked healthier than he had in years. Theft apparently agreed with him. We don't want to ruin you. We just want what belongs to the family. Belongs to the family, I repeated, keeping my voice low and trembling. I built it. With our capital, Claudia corrected sharply. Let's not rewrite history again, dear. It's unbecoming. Mr. Vance cleared his throat. He played his part perfectly, shuffling his papers with the air of a lawyer who knew he was beaten. My client is prepared to discuss terms of surrender, he said. However, given the tax implications of such a large asset transfer, we need to be absolutely certain about the paper trail regarding the initial funding. Sterling rolled his eyes. We've already been over this. It was cash. Family savings. There is no paper trail. That's the nature of cash. We understand that, Vance said. But Julian is terrified of an IRS audit. If she signs over the deed, she needs protection. She needs a sworn statement, a deposition where you explicitly detail the dates and amounts of the cash transfer. If you put it on the official record, under penalty of perjury, she will feel safe enough to sign. I looked up, meeting Claudia's eyes. I forced a tear to well up. It wasn't hard. I just had to think about them ripping out my vintage deadbolts. Please, I whispered. I just want this over. I can't afford a trial. I can't afford to fight you anymore. But I need to know I won't go to jail for tax evasion because of this money. If you just swear to it, if you just tell the court you gave me the cash in 2021, I'll walk away. The silence in the room was heavy. I watched Arthur. I saw the greed warring with caution in his eyes. But then he looked at Justin, his golden boy, currently grinning at his phone screen, and the greed won. He looked back at me, seeing only the broken draft horse, finally ready to be put out to pasture. Fine, Arthur said, slamming his hand on the table. If that's what it takes to get you out of our house, we'll do it. We have nothing to hide. We can schedule the deposition for Thursday, Sterling said, checking his calendar. We'll get it on the record, sign the settlement papers immediately after, and you can vacate by the weekend. Thursday works, I said, wiping my eyes. Claudia patted my hand, soft and smug. You're finally doing the right thing, Julian. We'll even let you keep your tools. I pulled away. Thank you. I left, waited for the elevator doors to close, then wiped off the fake tears. They'd taken the bait. Convinced the deposition was their victory lap, They hadn't checked their own history. In 48 hours, they'd swear to a lie. At the deposition, Claudia confidently testified she gave me $50,000 in cash on August 12, 2021, from savings kept in a floor safe. She swore they were solvent. I introduced Exhibit A, their Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing, dated August 20th, 8 days later, declaring zero cash, zero assets. Silence. They had trapped themselves. Either they lied to federal court bankruptcy fraud or they were lying now perjury. Both were fatal. Their lawyer invoked the Fifth and withdrew the case. Too late. The transcript was public. The United States trustee reopened their bankruptcy within days. Assets frozen. Fraud exposed. Everything seized. 2 weeks later, a sheriff arrived, not for me, but for Justin. He was evicted, stole my parents' last car, and disappeared. I sold the house. Walked away with $300,000. Bought land. Started my own company. Clean break. When my parents texted, begging for help, I blocked the number. Family isn't DNA. It's respect. And I was finally free.